Hi, welcome to our podcast. As always, I'm Mary Abazia. I have Tom Spitali and Sean Wellham. And, we are always thinking about strategy. And in this case, we look back on the trends that have occurred, or at least first were predicted, and then where they either went, as thought or didn't. So that's what we're going to tackle. And, just as a kind of a setting the stage for this, we do see that it was, I guess, cementing year is the way to think of it, as opposed to sometimes like with the pandemic, there were breakthrough things that happened. So I'm going to open it up to Tom. Tom, you can start to talk about some of the trends that were predicted and how they went.
Well, the one that I would really like to focus on is, of course, the adoption of AI. And I like, Mary, I like your analogy of it being a cementing year rather than a breakthrough year. I think there was one of the things that I saw is that a lot of B2B companies are like stuck in the cement when it comes to AI. I mean, that is the biggest thing as I look back on it. Um, and realize that there is all of this, tremendous amount, at least in the B2B world, which tends to be a slower adopting environment than the B2C world. There's all of this, I don't know, fear about AI and trepidation, and resistance of people to actually adopt it for fear that it's going to take over their jobs, and almost like the overblown nature of the criticisms of AI versus looking to what an amazing tool that it can be. One of the things that I saw, which kind of I think contributes to all of this, is a Salesforce report. Salesforce reported that AI generated insights often exacerbated existing CRM chaos and therefore causing a lot of commercial teams to not really trust or adopt AI because of this. And of course, the problem is that the underlying data that was underneath it wasn't really AI's fault. AI just took the messy underlying data and served up things that were unreliable and couldn't be trusted. And it's kind of like that idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So that's one of the things I see. I want to just see if you guys agree with me, if that is something that happened in 25 that was a bit surprising.
Yeah, I think the depending on how you look at what was promised or what was expected at the beginning of the year, I think it's underperformed in terms of some of the maybe overhype. It's not unusual, is it, for a new technology to be sort of thought of. Classically, we overestimate the impact in the short term and we underestimate the impact in the long term. I think we're seeing that same thing
Mhm.
play out because I imagine, and of course, I've got no data for this, but just anecdotally and just in conversations, I imagine that the majority of AI use cases is pretty low level in terms of what it will eventually become as it intertwines into the enterprise and all of the functions, whether that's strategic or marketing or production or operations or whatever it happens to be. So I think you're right. I don't think of any individual necessarily promised that AI would be bigger than it is. I think the stock market is a little bit exuberant in terms of the valuations going on in these companies. They need to see some traction. I think back to the dot-com boom in the late 90s. A lot of very frothy valuations for businesses that were in this e-commerce, e-business space. Big correction and then a slow build, and it did fulfill its promise, but over a longer time period. And I agree with that much, Tom. Anyway, I think the future is extremely bright and fascinating with AI. But I think if we honestly looked at how it's been adopted today and the success of it, we're very much in that. We talk about a cementing year, but I think it's almost the bottom of the learning curve. We're figuring this stuff out, some better than others, but it's a slower burner than I think we were promised at the beginning of this year. That's how I characterize it.
Yeah. Actually, I've talked to over 50 B2B companies about their AI use, adoption. And what I find is, I mean, it's a classic adoption curve, and there are, well, most of the companies that I'm talking to have at least used AI in their products or in their services. So it's starting to come into the way that they can serve up their customers better. But it's like, for example, John Deere, they have this See and Spray, which they end up killing weeds, but not the plants because of AI that is built into their products, as an example. And so it's interesting to hear that. But when I press people to say, okay, well, if you trust it in your products, how are you using AI to build your own strategies for prioritizing market spaces or helping you understand customer needs more? There is such a resistance to it. It's like, oh, it hallucinates, and the fact is that AI is like having a market research assistant, and so you have to train it. You have to be able to adjust to it. So in that case, there is clear segmentation in terms of how companies are either, as Tom said, you originally, very fearful of being able to use it for strategy building, maybe in my products but not in strategy. So
Mary, one of our clients made, I think, a brilliant observation last week when we were talking to them about AI. He said to us, so many people were thinking about AI to kind of use it to narrow decision making, right? To, almost replace decision making, right? Maybe create, have ChatGPT create my marketing plan for this year. What he said is what AI should be utilized for is to expand your options, expand your thinking, generate ideas beyond what is just the obvious of what you've done. And we love that because the idea is when people utilize our tools in a strategic setting, they tend to come down to kind of a conclusion. This is how the market should be segmented. And they should do that. They should have that discipline. They should do that work. But the idea then is use AI to maybe generate a couple of variations on the theme. I've segmented my market this way. I kind of like it, but could I have thought this about this in a different way? What's two or three ways? And at each juncture, use it to kind of expand your thinking, make better, more creative decisions, but while controlling the process, making sure that you're doing the discipline, you're doing the work, and ferreting out the hallucinations because they'll happen, but you're in control of that. I thought that
Yeah,
was such an amazing
I
insight.
agree.
I mean that's
I
how
agree.
we're learning how to use it. That's why I characterize it as a learning curve because I was sat on a train going to London the other day, and there was a chap in front with his computer. I couldn't see, and I wouldn't have read if I could because it was too far away. But he was typing away, but I could clearly see he was looking at email and then opening Chat GPT and then typing something in, then getting a big block of text, then copying it and pasting it into the email. And I thought, these days you really are. We're spending our life just we're acting as the agents while AIs chat to each other over email. Look, it seems that is maybe a productivity hit. Maybe if it's like send me a pleasant professional reply to say no thank you and you don't have to think it, could well be a productivity hit. But I think that idea of expansion, Tom, of broadening options, then using your experience, your tacit knowledge, and the collective wisdom of your team to then filter back down to action. It's kind of very similar methodology that we use in workshops where we want to expand and have people think of lots of different benefits sought or different types of segments, but then ultimately narrow towards an actionable group. And AI, and I think that's really worth repeating because a lot of people think of it as a way of narrowing the options, of tell me what to do. And this is like, give me some choices that will give me something to think about, give me some food for thought. And that really sums up why AI has in some ways underdelivered because of the promises that people have put onto it, but actually is following a classic adoption curve where we will just get smarter over the medium to long term with it.
Hmm. Yeah. Sean, do you have a trend that you want to bring up?
I mean, obviously, AI was the obvious one. I was just thinking as we started talking, we need to think about others, maybe macroeconomic, maybe those sorts of trends. I don't think we can ignore the um, the the shock that's gone through the global economy, particularly with a return to tariffs and protectionism, is something that nobody, pretty universally, nobody would have wanted. Very few wanted. The consequence was always heralded as being Armageddon, pushing into recession, depression, and so forth, and that hasn't happened. So it's another one of those things. Let's not debate the rights and wrongs of tariffs. That's not for us to do. But let's just say that these things now exist, and the fact they're not driving inflation, particularly in the US, which is raising all of its tariffs pretty much everywhere, I can only think is because the businesses that are paying the American businesses that are paying these tariffs are choosing to play the long game of treating it as an extra tax, which is essentially what it is, and are holding fire because at some point they probably believe and hope those tariffs will go away, whether that's in 3, 4 years' time. And then maybe they're just willing to ride it out without passing everything on to the consumer. So it's another strange one in terms of macroeconomics. The predictions were quite cataclysmic. This is going to lead to inflation and job losses, and it hasn't. And I guess that's why I think it is, because the full effect is not being passed on; it's being absorbed by businesses. That's another
Yeah,
one I would suggest.
I think that that's true. And I studied economics in school, and so I'm always looking to see what happened. And we've talked about, how do you address um, cost going up? Do you pass on that in terms of pricing increases? And it seemed like companies did a couple of things. Some of them had a little bit more of a warning, and so they stocked up and then had inventory that they were able to sell at a lower cost. That helped them a little bit. But some of them have just absorbed it, and what's happened is that their profit margins have really gotten squeezed.
Mm.
So I believe that it's just a delayed inflation that we're going to see on pricing. I think the prices are going to continue to go up, and the supply chain, they're struggling to somehow, adjust how they're getting their materials, given this new rules of the game.
Yeah.
Uh,
And there's that time element too, because the one of the intended consequences was to make it more attractive to manufacture domestically, to find domestic sources of supply and lower your costs that way. But that's something else that can't get turned on overnight. Building factories, building supply chains, building that capability takes years. And it may well be that I don't know. I'm guessing that investment is not yet taking place because, again, we're in this too short term. If it's going to take 3 years to build factories and we find out in 3 years tariffs go away all of a sudden, it's hard to stimulate that kind of investment. So, we're possibly not even seeing the intended consequence of this, which is reinvestment in domestic manufacturing.
these are big ships, the economies take a
Yeah.
long time. And I think that the effects are too soon to judge. I'll just say that. I mean, it could go longer. I'd probably get into political discourse that we're trying to stay away from. But the fact is I think it's too soon to judge.
Yeah, I think that's a fair
Yeah.
point, Tom. And I think we meticulously avoid politics. And the way I'm looking at this, because I'm the one that raised it, was not so much. I think the political discussion is should we, shouldn't we? Should we have done it? Shouldn't we have done it? And what were the alternatives? That's not for us to talk about. The consequence, once it's happened, as it affects our client base and who we see with long global supply chains, it's interesting that the worst predictions of the consequence of these have not, and let's say yet, come to pass if they ever do. But you're right, it's not a political issue; it's an economic one. At this point, the ship sailed. It's the reality that we're dealing with now.
So I was looking at trends like you guys said with AI and the tariffs. I think that the other big trend that I'm kind of fascinated by is how companies oscillate between being outside in and really being customer focused and market focused, and then trying to address a lot of internal issues. And the best example I've seen of that over this year is Nike. At the beginning of the year, Nike had decided to, kind of divorce or take a break from their distribution system. And so it was very internal. The customers weren't getting served in the right ways. And so on, the sneakers on, they just came on pretty much, it feels like out of nowhere, and was able to take over a major company. There was Nike and Adidas, or Adidas. Um, and then here comes this other, company that came onto the scene. And so watching the shifts now, as they're trying to then say, okay, now we need to think more about, different markets and different customers and serve them better. I think that that's really an interesting live case that's going on.
Mm.
I got another one to throw out there as well. I'm not sure if this did happen, fulfilled its promise or not, but obesity medication, Ozempic and the other variations on the same theme. I, as you probably do, know people that have transformed quite dramatically and clearly by using these treatments. I mean, is that true of you guys? You know people within your circle that have lost a lot of weight and you're like, wow, it's pretty stark, the transformation. But has it had a bigger? We talked about this. One of our podcasts a while ago, we talked about this. This could affect everything. The clothing market. It could be a boon for clothing manufacturers because everyone needs a new wardrobe all of a sudden. It could change the economics of flying if you're carrying less weight. There's a lot of these cause and effect chains that start with what if people collectively or on average weighed less or were a different size. Not sure I've seen or read anything about a societal shift, but I certainly anecdotally see it in my circle. So I don't know whether the obesity medicine is delivered its promise in terms of this is going to change things, or it's still, the jury's still out. What do you guys think?
Not sure. I mean, I'd like to dig into that a little bit because now that you say it, it wasn't something that hit my radar. But I just wonder about prescribing behaviors and you know who is able to get it and if it's super easy to get the real good stuff. I mean, obviously, something shows some success in the marketplace. There's a whole bunch of knockoffs and competitors for that business, and I see a lot of that happening. I'm just wondering, can as many people get Ozempic as want it? Do you have to have a certain kind of underlying, I don't know, some kind of proclivity towards diabetes or something to get it? I don't know the answer to that. I guess that's my assumption is that more people would like to be on it than can perhaps get it, and as indications expand in the world of pharmaceuticals and the makers of Ozempic are able to treat more and more conditions. Maybe that's what the phase we're in right now, but I don't really know the answer to that. Do either of you?
Yeah, they are. Well, they're trying to see if it affects Alzheimer's, and it hasn't. They haven't proven that out yet. But I do still see that when we talk about cementing type things and then something that's real pivotal, I think that is a really pivotal trend because it's going to have ripples effects on industries, in the next years to come. For example, we work in the aesthetics business industry, and there's Ozempic face, where when you lose so much, you need to have the aesthetic work done so that your face isn't sagging anymore, or maybe other parts of your body. So that's opened up a huge new opportunity for an industry. So I do think that was a good one that we're seeing a lot of ripples over the
Yeah, I
next
think
several years.
I think that's ripples is the right word. I think it's going to gradually spread across. There's also this another economic thing, which is the cost because of and none of this is an implied criticism. Again, it's a reality of the different systems. But in the US, people are paying, if they are paying or they're getting prescribed, $900 to $1,000 a month for Ozempic treatment. Over here, you can go private and just get it for like 90 to 180 a month. I mean, it's that
Mm.
cheap. It's almost 9 times cheaper over here. Now, that's caused friction. I think even President Trump mentioned it, of saying, like, why is this drug so much cheaper over there? And of course, there's a lot of different structural reasons why it is, and a lot of different business models in play. But it'd be interesting also, because we're speculating, none of us know this, but what the adoption rate would be over here. I've met people I know that aren't super rich or super medically critical, but have lost a ton of weight because they're paying for this stuff because it's a couple of $100 a month.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not an expensive choice. You know, it's cheaper than a lot of other elective procedures that you could go through. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. But I don't know. Did that over deliver or undeliver or deliver on plan? I'm not sure how it. But it's an interesting one to keep an eye on. It's going to change
Yeah.
a lot of other things. The ripple effect, as Mary said.
Yeah. Well, we're always interested if you have other predictions that you were building your strategies on that didn't come about or ones that you missed. We would love to hear about them as you close out 2025.
Thank you.